Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. This week with us, we have a true personality of the voiceover world, Randy Resnick. He has got, so much experience, starting from amateur radio down to the latest technologies. He ran the voice of over IP user conference call for a long time, and I'm very happy to have you on the podcast today, Randy. Thank you.
Great to be here, Luca. And uh, I've been friends with so many people over at Free Switch for all these years, but they have never seen this. This is how I got started in the technology of communication. So I'm about 15 there, and you can see the big Viking transmitter, Collins receiver. You can't really see all the details, but you can see what's up there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So, we were doing networks like Clubhouse in 1960s, right?
Yeah,
So,
that was
I mean,
you're you're
it was
right.
just,
That's what
it
it
was,
was.
it was exactly the same because it was on shortwave and people were checking in. It was literally a network. Yeah, where are you from? I'm from Minneapolis, blah, blah, blah. So I was always interested in that. And I was making FM transmitters with transistors. I even made a TV camera, a Vidicon camera with tubes in my basement. That's how
Wow.
far that's how far it goes back. I don't know. You guys probably haven't even seen a tube, a vacuum tube.
I have, but that's because my father was one of the first telephony engineers in the country when the move to from fully analog to partial digital happened. So he had all the sort of equipment at home with for my mother's joy, and he kept pulling stuff apart to learn and then soldering it back through. So I've seen a lot of that stuff, but you're right, it's not common.
Well, a lot of people have not, and of course, we moved from transistors to ICs and integrated circuitry, and now it's like a zillion transistors on a little chip about the size of your eye. Anyway, from those days, I moved total geek. No friends in high school. One friend in high school, so we all hung out. The two of us, plus we had a couple other geeks. Zoom forward to free world dial-up, another kind of an ancient thing. That was Jeff Pulver. So that was in the 2000s. I'm not even sure when, but that's when I got introduced to Asterisk and Digium. And Asterisk was the first VoIP tool that I knew about. You couldn't say VoIP then, people didn't really know what it was, but I knew that I was in Europe and it was very expensive to call the States.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and built myself a little Asterisk server and was using that in our company. And so I learned a lot about it. I'm really not much of a programmer. I'm a very bad programmer.
Oh wow.
I can do so, barely could do the dial plan, but I did it. And then, of course, over the years, we started. The VUC started in I want to say 90. Let's see, Talk Shoe 2006, 7, something like that, maybe. Anyway, we went for 12. Yeah, 2000. Right? 12 years would be 18,
Yeah.
right? 2018. So yeah, and at that point we were voice only. We were using a bridge, but we had Tony and all the gang from Free Switch on all over those years many times. So I got to know everybody, and of course went to a lot of the conferences. But unfortunately, never ClueCon because it's always been in Chicago, and flying from when I was living in Paris, for example, was just prohibitive. So I could not make it. But I saw a lot of the folks at different conferences over here, Astrocon, Comedia World, and what was the one in England with Dan? Communicate. Oh boy, when you get old, you can't remember these things. Plus, I've been
Oh
to a
yeah.
million conferences, so I can't remember all of them. But did meet all of the guys at that point.
Yeah.
So that was that. We went for all those years with all these folks well, it started as the Asterisk Users Conference, and then it was VoIP Users Conference, so VUC. And it ended Visions Under Construction because we started having people who really weren't into VoIP. Just like today, you don't really talk about VoIP when we talk about signal wire. Maybe you do internally, but I don't think the word VoIP was mentioned in any of your communication, which I was pleased to see, by the way, last Monday, when we were supposed to do the schedule. I actually watched about 20 minutes of of your PR stuff. It's really amazingly well done. I congratulate whoever did all
Yeah.
that stuff. It's beautiful. No, really, I recommend that everybody in the business take a look, because we
Oh,
know you and we didn't expect a professional. I figured
oh
it would
wow.
be people talking and all that. No, no, it's beautiful. It's beautifully
Well,
done.
thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Well, there's something interesting that so I started in voiceover B around 2009 because I graduated in 2004 and I spent 5 years in that professional world of Accenture and all the other satellite consulting companies, mostly crunching numbers on Excel
Mhm.
and related stuff. And then I moved for various reasons. I ended up doing open source work with Mojolingo in Atlanta, and that's where it all started. And the Voice over IP user conference was extremely informative to me when I was getting started. I over the years, I watched so many episodes. I've listened to so many episodes. I actually think joined just a couple of them, but it was great to always listen in and learn about all the things. So how that get started? Like, it was so influential for a long time that I'm curious.
Well, the way it started was I started there was a company called TalkShoe, um, from a play on the talk shoe that Maxwell Smart in the movie Get Smart. Actually, it was a TV show, Get Smart, and he was always using a shoe phone. So this company TalkShoe, that was 2006, podcasting. So in that model, you had a room. It's a little like Clubhouse again, because it was a room and you phoned in with your phone, and they used arbitrage to fund it. In other words, people would call in, and however that stuff works, there's a profit between the centers, because in those days phones were not as cheap. The minutes and all that were not cheap like they are today. And at that point, maybe 1 year later, I happened to meet Mark Spencer, who was in Paris. That was the IRC days, right? When people were talking,
Yeah.
chatting on IRC and
All
trying
right.
to
Yeah.
build Asterisk.
Oh
And
wow.
I'm pretty sure some of the free switch techies are probably from that world. At least they experimented with it. If they weren't working for Digium, they were certainly friends with Mark and all of
I'm
those
pretty
guys,
sure
right?
Anthony Minasali did a lot of work on Froswich on Astros in the early days.
Uh-huh.
Then he thought he'd like to do something different, and that's where Froswich started. But yeah, there's a lot of work about with Astros back in the days.
But the fact is, it's Signal Wire, which is how old now? About, I'm going to just guess out of the top of my head, 3 years or older.
Yeah, roughly,
Six,
yeah.
about, yeah.
3 years
So,
and change because
okay.
of course we were stalled for like 6 months before. So yeah, we're past 3 years, but not by much.
And when it was announced, I'm sorry, there's a little lag, so I talked over you for a second there. Soon as it was announced, I got a beta account and started
Oh.
fooling around with it. And what's funny is that a few weeks ago, I answered Tony's letter to everybody saying, "Hi, I'm the CEO, and we're doing this with SignalWire." And then I got a whole bunch of things from people saying, "Do you have a SignalWire space?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've had it for about 3 years." I mean, I've been messing with SignalWire forever. I've got a bunch of lines that I was testing. I actually initially tested it to see how the reliability was for SIP, simply, termination. And I can tell you, by the way, it's very, very good, probably better than anything else I've used. So there was
Oh,
that.
nice.
Yeah, I use it a lot with Google Voice. I'm still in Europe, so
Oh yeah.
calling the States is cheaper than it was. As a matter of fact, on cell phones now, my wife, for example, has a plan. I'm trying to convert this to dollars. She pays maybe at this stage, maybe $21 a month, and she can call 100 countries included in the subscription for no extra tax. All unlimited, everything here in this country, unlimited roaming, not unlimited, but uh,
Yeah.
good roaming in Europe. Good roaming in Europe. I mean, you couldn't go live someplace, but you can go visit these conferences. I never had any problem with data. And then she can call the States on her line. I can't because I'm cheap. I have a $13 a month program, which is the same thing, but just doesn't have a foreign calling. So the point is that now I still use Google Voice, and I use Google Voice to some extent with my Signal Wire lines. It works very well. The only problem I've ever had with any of the services like SignalWire is that banks don't like it because it's not a carrier, so they will not generally text you on these numbers. I've tried everything on the different numbers, and that doesn't work. And I don't know that there's an answer because they're worried about security, and I guess they're thinking that we can, do whatever we want with VoIP, which you pretty much can. So they don't allow it. But other than that, I love it. Great, works great, good quality, always good
Oh wow,
connections.
that's super. Everybody will be super happy to hear about that.
Oh yeah, good experience. And I've been messing with video for a while, and actually since Tony's letter, I built a conference, and I didn't really have a good convenient way at first. I didn't think of a good way to use a web page, so I spun up a DigitalOcean thing, and put a
Yeah.
page on that. But then I realized, well, wait a minute, I can just put a page on any site, and I happen to have a Squarespace site, which apparently the SignalWire people have made sure that it works with Squarespace and WordPress and all that. So it's pretty interesting. I mean, you just slap that code, the embed code, and it works. So pretty happy with that. And now I'm trying to get some people on board to do some more important conferences. In which
Wow.
case, we'll have to ramp up a little bit. I can't do the programming, so we'll have to get some help and try to get, in order to personalize it, get more power. But we'll look into that as soon as I get some people behind what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. That's the. Well, super happy to hear, and we're always here to help. I run solutions architecture. I'm always helping developers, and I think it's a great way to be with people and learn about what they're doing. So anything you need, let me know.
Okay. What are
Cool.
I would like to know what the direction, I haven't spent a lot of time looking. What are the interesting directions of SignalWire as far as the video conferencing thing goes? What's the main thing is to have a customizable kind of a white
Yeah.
label, or is that the target?
Yeah. The idea is that have something that you can embed into your application and I mean, not necessarily say SignalWire anywhere. It's just
Right.
it's an embeddable white labeling platform. For example, we have a couple customers who use it. So one of them uses the video platform as a video identification system, so you can do remote signature. Europe has some weird. Well, you know how electronic signature works in Europe. There's
Mhm.
some weird requirements like you have to be recognized visually by someone that presses a button and say, "Hey, this is actually Randy." Click,
Hmm.
and from that point on, your login is enabled to do things that you otherwise couldn't do. And they use our video platform for that, and it's just embedded into this document presentation system. It's interesting. We have other people using it for remote inspections. So you want to take a look at how bad a house you need to renovate looks like,
Hmm.
and the owner can just make you look around. You can ask them, "Hey, show me the window, go closer to this, etc." And that also doesn't. So it's not just to build video conferencing. In fact,
Mhm.
I will postulate you can use it for that, but it's like 10% of what you could do with it. That's the idea. The other thing we're doing, which is coming out shortly, we've first wave actually already came out, which is RTMP broadcasting. You can do broadcasting via RTMP, but what we're cooking and it's coming out soon is large scale viewership only members for rooms. So that can be me and you speaking to each other, but then there's another 10,000 people who can just listen and or watch to use for real time broadcasting. That stems from the fact that you know very well that WebRTC is real time and it's built to keep everybody at the same moment. Well, latency notwithstanding, we more or less all get the events at the same time.
Mhm.
Plus, is what's happening in the video needs to be timed with something else that's happening on the screen. Generally, we'll have the same latency. So if you're watching a game show and everybody has to answer a question at the same time, you can do a game show online. When I say please answer the question that's on your screen right now, the question has to be there.
Right.
Over RTMP, you don't have control with how much buffering the clients are doing, so everybody can be anywhere between 10 seconds and 3 minutes away from the current time, which is why for the audience, which is why when you're listening or watching a game, a soccer game, in our case, we're from Europe, or a football game, if you're in the US, and a someone scores, and it's where I live in Italy, so soccer here is like the main thing. It's bigger than anything. And when there's the World Cup on or stuff like that, and you're watching a game via streaming, you can almost always tell if someone has scored before, because people who are watching via old style wave television, actual broadcast,
Mhm.
they get it slightly earlier because that's actually quicker, the broadcasting stuff. So I know someone has scored, but it's not happened yet on my screen because I'm
Mhm.
watching it on a streaming service. So that's what we're going for. And that's, I mean, we've gone a long way from your photo,
Yeah.
which I wanted. So the audience should, for younger people, I'm pushing 45, so I can say I'm a bit of an old person too in this environment. And look at the size of that equipment and compare that with what we could do with what they have already in our pockets, and think about that most of what you have in your pocket is a screen. Like the rest is not. I mean, the screen is big because that way you can do more. And but otherwise, that what's in an iPhone could probably fit on a, I would say, postage stamp. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not much else in here, to be fair.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Actually, this this transmitter here, that's 250 watts AM. You can see how big it is compared to me. So it's like, and heating up the whole house practically, with the vacuum
Wow.
tubes. So yes, as you say, now I like this size phone, so this is perfect. Plus, I can see it looks pretty good on the screen, which is rare.
Oh yeah, it does.
Uh, how much um, how much testing have you done with mobile devices on the signal wire video? Does it work well?
Yeah, we use it with mobile often. I join calls daily, again, as a software architect living in a different continent than most of our customers. I end up joining at weird times, so I'm very often on the phone. I have no problems there.
Oh,
In fact, I think, I mean, this is a pitch for signal wire, but in general, using an MCU like the video module that Friswitch uses, which is sort of a precursor to what we do. An MCU, for people who don't know, is mixing all the video into one video and then sending that to each participant.
mhm.
That's much better on mobile than SFUs. Like, which SFU will be, you get one video feed for each participant. Especially if you have more than 5 or 6 people, my phone will just heat up to. I mean, if you use Google Meet and stuff like that, just goes to 100 degrees, and then because it's heavy on the CPU. So yeah, I think MCUs are a great way to go forward.
Oh,
So I
absolutely.
I have something to ask you because I'm super curious. I know you have a huge music career as a sort of a side. I don't even know if that's a side job at this point, or it's your main thing, because you have so much going on. I'd like to know more about that, and if you have any open source parts to it. Like, are you using any open source tools? Has that helped with the software part? I'm just curious.
Well, that's a good question. The only thing that comes to mind that I use all the time is curl. Curl just celebrated its what 20th birthday or 30th. I saw it on LinkedIn. I can't remember.
Yeah,
And
it's more than.
we had that gentleman on the VUC, of course,
Oh wow.
curl guy. Well,
Yeah, curl powers the world at this point. It's
it's
literally
well,
everywhere.
if you want to talk to any of the APIs, you could use it all the time just by hand if you don't mind talking to the console. Hey, I got a couple of ads I'd like to place here for my work.
Of
First of
course.
all, before we talk about music, I just wrote a book.
Oh, nice.
Science fiction book. This is the wrong format, so it's not even readable. But I've fixed it since then. You get that on Amazon. Called Stinger Bots. I use my middle name to confuse everybody further, but it's available on Amazon. It's a good buy at $6, Kindle or paperback too, so you can take it on that trip. So there is that. But
I am a big sci-fi fan, so I'm getting that right after the call.
that's great. Well, wait, and I'll put it. I'll make it free for a few days soon. Now that we got the format straight, and maybe we can get a bunch of people to download it. You're welcome to
Of
have it.
course.
And the other thing you asked about music. So I have been playing music for money for 56 years. So
Wow.
longer than you've been alive. But of course, I took a little detour into tech because making money in music is extremely difficult. I did that for several years, but then, the work kind of dried up. And as you get older, I'm not going to be a front man or anything. So I was a better conference leader than I was a leader of a band on stage.
Mhm.
However, with streaming, so I came out with a solo CD in 1995. My first recording, by the way, that I co-wrote was in 1972. Count them, 50 years, a half a century ago.
Wow.
That was in the studio. But my solo CD was 1995, and that was a certain number of units that we pressed. But the point is now, all of that and much more, about 160 original tracks are available on all the platforms: Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Deezer, every place. And there's one URL. I don't know if you're able to type in a URL.
We'll add
It's
that to the video description when we publish the video.
okay, and I think I emailed that to you. It's just simple. It's ffm.bio/Randulu. My Randulu is my kind of my stage name electronically, because it's a good. You can Google it, and I don't think there's anybody else with that name except
Yeah,
on
that's
Instagram.
cool. So, what genre of music do you make, first of all?
Oh, that's such a tough. I mean, I've done a little of everything. I would say it's mostly jazz oriented, but
Mhm.
modern. Although I have country songs, at least one anyway. Uh, blues, some electronic as well. I mean, there's something. I really think there's something for everybody if they
What
can go
what
check it out.
instrument? Well, so, sounds like you play more than one instrument. But what's your favorite?
I started when I was like 8 years old. I started on clarinet, but I broke that
Oh, of
because
all
I
things, yeah.
I broke that because it was too squeaky. And so I never kept that up. But I did move to guitar when I was in my teens because I found that it attracts the female of the species. So I liked that aspect of it. They really liked when you're on stage with a guitar, right? In the 60s. The
Yeah.
guitar, we used to call the guitar the accordion of the 60s because there was an accordion in every closet in the 1950s, right? But anyway, I moved to saxophone just about 4 years ago. Didn't move, I mean, I picked up because I've always wanted to play saxophone. And then I've got I just happen to have this here. This is an electronic instrument. I can't really zoom out, but so it's
Oh,
exactly
wow.
like a saxophone.
So there are electronic saxophones?
Well, they call it that, but it's really a synthesizer in the shape of a
Hmm.
saxophone. So unfortunately, it doesn't sound anything like a saxophone. It has
Okay.
saxophone sounds, but they're not any good. You've
It
got to have a
probably
real, you got to have a real
helps with the
saxophone.
fingering. Probably helps with learning, right? More than
Yes,
anything.
and you can play in the middle of the night with earphones, so that's handy if you want.
Wow, I never saw something like that. So I've seen, of course, everybody has seen an electric guitar, and I am a middling amateur drummer, so I have
Oh,
an electronic drum kit, but I never seen an electronic clarinet. That's or a saxophone.
oh
That's
yeah.
really interesting.
Oh, there are several. There are probably about five of them. I have two. I have this one that's recent, and then I have a Roland as well, or is it Yamaha? Both, I don't know. And of course, everybody should have one of these.
Oh yeah,
You can
definitely.
play. It's funny. I don't have it right here. I did for a long time, and it stopped working. I have a drum machine that's you might know about it. It has pads you can play,
Oh
but
yeah,
with your hands, not the big drum set,
yeah.
unfortunately, but the little pads, about 16 of them. I don't use that anymore, though. I use loops because it's just much easier to just have somebody else play drums and arrange it the way you want. So
I
that's the
love playing
story.
with those little software based. I don't have any hardware, but I love playing with those little software based drum machines because they're. I mean, you can make loops, and it's easy to get something going. Which leads into, well, we could tie things together. Like, what do you think the open source world is missing right now when it comes to music? For example, I don't know there's anything like that's open source, like open source loop sampling machines and stuff. You can do Audacity, but Audacity is really just a wave editor You can use it for anything, but making music in particular with it is not very easy because you actually end up having to do it yourself.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if any of those tools that are not, $500 and up are open source. There is one thing that you can play with other people all over the world over the internet, and
Mhm.
that is open source. And I'm trying to remember the name. Is it Jamtaba or something like that? Is one of them. There's about two or three, and it's really an interesting piece of software because, as you know, we have a little thing called the speed of light. So if you are, where are you located right now?
I'm in Italy, northern area,
Okay,
about an
so we're
hour
not
from
that
Milan.
we're not that far apart. But
Nope.
if you and I were jamming, you're on drums, and then we have a
Mhm.
bass player in San Francisco, and then I'm here. Even though you and I maybe, if you've got a really great connection, we're maybe 30 milliseconds, 40 apart. Still, the guy in San Francisco, guy or gal in San Francisco playing the bass is going to be more like 80, 100, 120 or more. Plus, it's of course variable and all that, and you don't know what's
Yeah,
going
it
on.
is never the same.
So the software server has a built-in metronome, and it does something with time slices so that we're not all here. It's kind of like an MTU, what you explained. It's you're not all hearing the thing at the same time, but you're somehow in time. It kind of gives me a headache thinking about how they did this. But the fact is that when you play with the metronome, you are playing in time with the other people because you're not hearing them live, you see. Because if you're hearing them live, you'd never be in time, right?
Yeah,
You know,
that's
that
that's
120 milliseconds is a, believe me, there's no way you could deal with that other than the
that's
trick.
a very interesting. That's
Yeah.
a very interesting thought about like how do you fix that, because that's super hard. I couldn't picture being able to play, as again, I'm not a very good drummer, but I do as a hobby, but because I like the rhythm and I just like it keeps me entertained. But how do you play with someone who's not on the same beat? Like that's super weird. It's not easy at all. So how does that work in general?
Well, somehow, like I said, they cut the time up somehow so that everybody hears a metronome, but they're not hearing the same metronome. So somehow it is put together at like an MTU, it's put together at a central on the server and then sent out. The part that gives me a headache is okay, so it's put together on the server and sent out, but what am I hearing and what do you hear? You know, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's the point. Because honestly, there is no way that when I hit the drum with my stick, that sound could line up with what the bass player is hearing. It might actually be harder on us drummers.
oh yeah.
Because if you're playing a bass or you're playing a guitar and you're not hearing very much, right? Because you're just hearing the strings go if you have no audio in the ambient in the area. While the drums will make a sound the moment you strike them. It's not like you can avoid that. Maybe with electronic pads, you still would throw me off a lot. You probably need to be very good at what you do to start with.
Well,
That's a super interesting. And you know who's done some work like that? Have you met anyone from the Janus project?
yes, of
Uh,
course. Yes,
Lorenzo
Italy, right.
Lorenzo
Lorenzo.
Miniero is also a very good musician. He's got
Yep.
published music on Spotify too, and he's done a lot of work. I think he spoke at a conference, probably even at ClueCon, about his experience with figuring out a way for people to be able to jam together using WebRTC and time skewing and all of that stuff. So there is something going on. But you're right, that could be a very good contribution. Like if we had something like that, it would really pull musicians together. Will be even easier to form bands, right? Because right now your problem is always everybody wants to play guitar, nobody wants to play bass. There's only a handful of drummers to go around, and not many singers are actually good. I don't know if that lines up with your experience in forming a band, but that's really how it goes.
Yeah, well, actually, one of the harder things, it's true, bass and drums are the hardest people to find who are any good. But here's the thing, what we're doing now is meeting people online through whatever network you like. It could be Instagram, or it could be, actually, Clubhouse is really big on this. So you meet people and talk to them in the room, and then you go, would you like to collaborate? So what we do is file exchange. It's all through exchanging files. And I've done this with about 10 people. In fact, I have one song called Voyage, and that song was written by me. I sent it to um, Trinidad to a piano player. He put his piano part on, and then we sent that mix to Ghana, and a percussionist mixed and produced that track. So it's a 3-country effort. But I've done a lot of those. In fact, I got another track today from the guy in Trinidad. He's a very nice piano player. You know, we're not even on the same time as far as hours. He's probably 10 hours difference, I think. I don't even know
That's
exactly where
awesome.
Trinidad is, to tell you the truth. I mean, I know it's far. I certainly know where Ghana is because it's close, actually. It's not that far, Africa. But anyway, I've also done this with people in the States. I used to play with a guy in a band maybe 45 years ago. He's still around and he records stuff, keyboard for me. I did a track with my brother who's in St. Paul, Minnesota right now, and he played piano. I wrote the song so that we could play it together, and we did. Who else? What other countries? Yeah, I should get in touch with Lorenzo because I've known Lorenzo for years. He plays guitar. I guess that's the biggest problem is that we both play guitar, but I can play saxophone to his guitar. I guess I should talk to him, find out if he can record. Hey, Lorenzo, you out there hearing me? Call
Yeah.
me, as they say.
I'll ping him. I'll ping him later. I know he watches the ClueCon Weekly, so I'm pretty sure he'll reach out. But I'll also ping him later. Yeah, it is. It's a very interesting thing how the tools that we build that are mostly open source, or we're trying to, or cloud version of them, which frankly are mostly about making it easier to run things. I
Mhm,
always say SignalWire started as a way for people to not have to run their own FreeSwitch server because it's not always easy. Because my other mantra as an architect is making one phone call or video call is easy. It's making a million of them that gets you.
mhm.
Takes you 2 hours to go from zero, if you have some Linux knowledge, to from zero to having a one working video call with your colleague. Takes you 2 hours, which probably lasts if you sort of know what you're doing. But how do you run a million calls? You need boxes, you need servers. So that aside, too, I think open source in general, we've been bridging a lot of gaps. So I think music is the next big thing. Actually, we should really double down on that. Also, music, as you said, presents very interesting technical challenges, which are not really there with voice quality, timing. If my voice cracks up just a little, or your video image freezes for a split second while we're talking about something else, does it matter? Yeah, it does if it happens often, but otherwise we can live with it. Well, miss a beat and you're throwing everybody off, and then it's your fault as the drummer. I know that firsthand.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're talking right now, and we're actually not so far apart, but I guess we are going to a server in the States, right? On the East Coast, maybe, or Chicago, or what?
Uh, so this is probably going through Europe, actually.
Oh,
This
really?
likely using the Frankfurt area. There's a couple big data centers over there, so
Right. So,
that's yeah, we're still going through a few servers, of course.
yeah, because
Cool.
I'm losing a little bit from time to time, and I thought maybe it was because we were going back to the States and back or something.
That's weird. Well, I guess we'll take a look. We're always deploying new things, so I'll go I go ask support about it.
Can I
Cool.
can I
So
ask how are you connected to the internet?
I have a Starlink connection because I live
Okay,
up in the Alps, and as soon as I got Starlink, I jumped on it because it's literally 5 times the speed that I used to get before.
I see.
Ping is not ideal, and sometimes you can tell, but at least the bandwidth is very, very good. And
Okay,
up in
'cause
the Italian mountains, you don't have many choices.
well, we're lucky in this city. This is a small city. I'm in Bordeaux, and it's not a big city, but almost everybody's got fiber here. They rolled it out really quickly.
Oh,
So I
nice.
have gigabit fiber here, so it's
Oh,
very
nice. Yeah,
handy. Very handy.
that's a super interesting. Well, Italy is different. We had this weird, and this is a good topic for Cooking Weekly for this today or another day, which is many countries ended up privatizing their phone networks. But does that actually work out well in the end? Like, for example, I don't have fiber because now that the network is owned by a private company, they look
Mhm.
at the map and see, hey, Luca lives with other 300 godforsaken people in a some weird corner of the Alps when there's snow 4 months a year in normal years and before global warming, but it will come back. And why should we spend, a couple $100,000 to run a fiber cable up to his little house? Let him use whatever. Let him use smoke signals. We don't care. And that is a discussion that's in. I know that France has a public network that sells service to the actual carriers. So the state owns the fiber. I know most people in the US is going to cringe at the idea of this the country owning the infrastructure, but I feel like it works better.
It does work better.
It's
They have no reason to cringe. When I go to the States, I pay $50 or $60 a month for the service I get for 12 here. So I don't know why they're cringing. And that's mobile. I'm sorry, that's mobile, but the same laws
still,
apply.
yeah.
In other words, we built this network on the money that we pay in taxes. So the original French phone network was the post office and France Télécom. So that was 100% state owned. I believe, I don't know what the percentages are. Let's pretend it's 50% private now with Orange, which is also in Spain, by the way, and maybe Italy too. But the thing about all of these things is whether it's internet at home or mobile phone carriers, the there's a what's the word I'm looking for? The infrastructure was pretty much built by our taxes. So as a result, you said it earlier, whoever's running that infrastructure, in the case say of Orange, they have to sell out at wholesale prices to anyone who can prove that they can operate, the rest of the network and with a commercial part of it. So that's why everything's so cheap here. And it's also why, I mean, everything's really much better. But you're right. If I lived in the Pyrenees or something in France, there would be no fiber. Obviously, fiber requires the nodes that are in town here. I just am surprised that they rolled it out so early. It's almost, I think it's almost all over this city now, and that's amazing. It really is. We used to have really good DSL too. Same thing, VDSL. It was almost as fast, actually, effectively, not the speed. But the thing about the DSL was same thing. Phone company, Orange owned it, France Telecom, but they had to lease it out. So I had some friends I met at an Astracon once who were running their little service. We had them for a while. Then we used a thing called Free, which is a Swiss guy who came in and completely broke everything in as far as financing goes. In other words, he came in, offered a 2-page contract instead of the 20 pages that Orange was doing, and the price was like 1/3. And as soon as he broke that monopoly, every operator now has a low-cost offer. There's even one for people who are looking for a job, €2 a month. You're on the euro, so you know what that is.
Wow.
€2 a month. It's not unlimited, but you can receive unlimited because we don't pay for received calls. We are not, you know that, I'm sure it's the same there.
Okay,
You're
yeah.
not charged for received minutes, only when you call, which is great.
That's awesome, and I feel like the idea of having a plan with someone who's looking for a job is just brilliant. Like, hey, we're gonna help you. We're gonna give you all the tools so that when you don't find a job, it's gonna be your fault. Essentially, it makes sense because otherwise, people get Italy has a problem where the job search aspect is not working very well because it's government run. So they tend to we have a joke here. They're called the offices where you go look for a job. They're called centers for employment.
Mm.
And the joke is that the only employment they create is the people that work there.
It's pretty funny.
So that's and I mean we have a huge bureaucracy, but still helping people in any conceivable way. And again, this brings up to how important telecoms are, and especially the open source stuff. Like you could empower people to do things that otherwise they couldn't be able to do. Like if you have free switch available, you can do a lot of things that for free or very cheap that otherwise you'd be paying money for. And I mean, there's something there too. Like in this great resignation world, maybe open source could be a place where people could go. Like, you don't like your current job, come help us. Which is
It-
actually a last question I'd like to ask you. We've been discussing this on the podcast for a long time. You have a very long time friend of the open source community. Many people have been saying that contributions have been going down recently. And it's do you feel that's the case? And if so, how do we get people to contribute again? And I have a feeling, and I've gotten this from many guests, that big companies taking open source software and then not even recognizing they use it and making billions on it as a great part in people being unhappy with contributing to open source projects. Put another way, if I'm going to build this and give it out for people to be happy and use it for their own things, and then I find out a large e-commerce company we're not going to name uses it to make $2 billion a week in revenue and sends me a cease and desist letter when I say, "Hey, I know the e-commerce company uses this, so that's great." They're going to say, "Well, you know what? Next time I'm just going to go work for the e-commerce company and not do open source."
It's, you touch on a lot of different points here, but one of them is I totally understand the frustration, and of course I've had friends, we've talked about this many times, uh, that if when you're using open source code, if you're not crediting it in the comments or whatever the standard, making it obvious that you're using libraries, there's something unethical about that for sure, and discouraging. On the other hand, I have a lot of like security cameras, stuff like that. A lot of products I've purchased in the past for years have, I think, look, I have an oven that connects to the internet.
Uh-huh.
I don't connect it. I do not connect it to Wi-Fi. I just won't. I'm not interested. But the point is, in their manual, the last 2 pages are reflections on, I don't know what you'd call this, but their credit basically they're saying, and we use this module from this library and so on. So that's kind of common, and that's I think it's like Siemens, a big company,
Yeah.
and they have these pages of explaining what their source is. Uh, on the other hand, I think some of the smaller big companies, if you know what I mean,
Yeah.
probably don't worry about it. They just go, well, whatever. It's not good for our image to show that we're building on the shoulders of giants, basically. But I did want to say one thing about open source that I think is fantastic, because over the years, I've known a lot of people who have built businesses based on serving, we're using open source stuff and being consultants, for example, to set up business phone systems and things like that. So they're using one of the open source tools that's available, one or more. I know better the Digium world, so I know that there were people um, building entire businesses based on, say, Asterisk, and they were consultants. They give lessons, bring more people into the open source fold. The biggest question is the one that you're asking, which is now, if contributions are going down, well, if they're going down the last few years, I was going to say that with the pandemic, everything's kind of crazy, but actually the contributions should be going up the last 2 years because you can't go anywhere. You couldn't. So I don't know about that, but yes, we need people who know how to code already to contribute. And I thought it was still a pretty vital economy as far as people contributing to projects. So I'm learning something new here. If you say that the contributions are down, I'm not directly involved, so
Hmm.
I wouldn't know.
I mean, there are many projects who it's probably just interest waxing and waning. Some people say one thing, some people say the other. I think what's really common is being frustrated with how companies take the open source work and not fully recognize it, or in some cases even flat out tell you, "We know, you know that we're using this software, but you're not allowed to say it." And I
Yeah.
mean, at that point, the open source project it's all about recognition, right? So if you can say these people are using it, it helps you. Plus, you're doing it for free, so you're not making any money off it. So it's still weird. Sometimes it's security reasons. I have heard people being told you're not allowed to say we use this platform because otherwise you're exposing our internal infrastructure. Well,
But
I guess that takes like 20 minutes to find out an nmap and
Right.
judicious usage of ZP
Right.
dump. So it's not really, oh, wow, now we know something we could have known anyways, but whatever.
Well, yeah, security by obscurity. The fact is that the most worrying tendency today has to do with, and I'm not going to name China, but the products that
Mhm.
are coming out of there that are using libraries, and then when the library's patched, you know the story. A lot of times they don't mess with it. There's a security problem. In fact, it's big with routers, right?
Yeah.
And other equipment that's based network based stuff, not just the little device that you plug in that turns your Christmas lights on. But you know, this is a whole other thing. I assume that they're using open source libraries. They don't say it, or if they do, I can't read Chinese. But like I said, the security implications. A lot of these cameras, for example, security cams, uh, you know, are extremely volatile, extremely risked for security. You've seen, you know, there's sites that can go out and look through for all the open security cameras. You can see hundreds of thousands of them all over the world, and it's because you know, there's no real security in it because they haven't kept up. They haven't patched the firmware of the devices and all of that. That's the biggest problem I see right now. And I don't it doesn't necessarily touch only open source, but it's certainly a problem if people are using open source libraries and not paying attention to the if they're not in the circuit, in other words. So they take some code out of a library, but then they're not in the circuit actively, they don't worry about the updates after if there are any security updates. So yeah, big problem there.
Yeah, that's there are a few things to figure out. Again, open source helps with the security aspect because you can really know what's going on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, not everybody wants you to take a look. There's a whole problem with outdated software, especially in hardware, in embedded hardware. I don't want to mention Asterisk by name because and it's not the Asterisk project's fault, but there are so many phones running stuff like phone equipment running stuff like Asterisk 1.8 back
Oh yeah.
from 2012 or something like that because
Hmm.
it just works and it's right that it keeps working, but at some point that's going to break in some way. Still, incidents are not as widespread as they should be, so maybe it's just wrong concern. Telephony can be very robust. Like if you're just taking phone calls, it's very hard to break, to be fair.
I
Great. So, well, Randy, thank you so much for joining us today. We went through a lot of history. We went through a lot of interesting discussions. And, well, I hope I see you at ClueCon sometime. ClueCon is coming back in October. And
one of
website is,
the one of these days, because you know I'm from Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a pretty short trip
oh, yeah,
from to Chicago. So one of these days, if I'm over there right then, there's no reason why I wouldn't come and see everybody. I'd love
it's
to.
going to be October 17th to 21st. I'm doing the first week training on the 21st for people who would like to join. And I think there's a special might not be running anymore, but if you're interested in getting a ticket, hit me up and we'll find something. It's
All
no
right.
problem there. And again, Randy, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you guys, all of everybody there, guys, ladies, everybody, whoever works there at Signal Wire and at Free Switch. Thank you for all you do. You do a lot for the world. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and we'll keep doing that.
All
Well,
right.
for the rest of the audience, I'll see you next week. Have a great day. Bye bye.